What's going on, everybody? Tim from Tirfon Orbital. Goth3 Designs, no stranger to the lightsaber community. When I think heirloom quality, bespoke, not bespoke really, heirloom. When I think heirloom quality chassis, design work, and end result, I think Rick at Goth3D. One of my very first expensive lightsaber purchases was the metal Grandmaster kit. I bought it directly on Rick's website. It came with Roman Props Graflex set and the Metal Master Graflex kit from Shapeways, and it's like one of my favorite display pieces. I absolutely love it. Rick's designs are phenomenal. The majority of his stuff he offers in premium metals through Shapeways. And that's not without saying, these chassis are not for the novice installer. I have trouble. I ran into some hiccups with this build. It's not. They are very intricate and time-consuming installs. There's a lot of precise cutting of tubes and rods, weathering of the parts. So it's definitely not just your average print off a chassis and install it and put it in a Hilt, right? With that being said, I love doing Goth chassis. To me, installing is very cathartic. It's meditative for me, but I kind of think of it like putting together a very intricate Lego. But the thing with some of these chassis from Rick, like if you're not precise on some of your tubes, if you don't cut them to his exact measurements, nothing will come together correctly in the end. So that's why you've really got to take your time. You've really got to measure twice, cut once. With this particular chassis install, like for example, there's a NeoPixel array in the speaker section that once you wire these NeoPixels up and put it in the chassis, there's no going back. So you really need to make sure you're testing your NeoPixels as you go. That way you don't run into an issue at the end where you power the chassis up. If you've got a NeoPixel that's not lighting, you've got to try to take the whole thing apart, and sometimes you can't. Once you've put the whole thing together, it's really, really difficult to come behind yourself and take components out. So I'll talk about that a little bit. I'll talk about the chassis, and then we'll go over how to use it, and then we'll be on our way, right? So here it is. This is an MPP. First of all, the hilt was sent to me by the client. This is an MPP from Roman Props. The blade holder on the inside of this is a custom blade holder that CCsabers offered. It's from Dagobah Swamp and 5280 Concepts. So I installed that in this build. The hilt itself, perfect replica in my opinion. It's chrome-plated brass throughout. Super, super hefty hilt. It's probably due to the fact that I think this emitter section is also steel. But yeah, super hefty. Okay, so that's the hilt. Here is the chassis. As I said, I love Rick's chassis. This thing is absolutely phenomenal. So in the pommel speaker section, there is a 6 NeoPixel array. There are 35 NeoPixels. These I actually used from Albert at the Smuggler's Outpost has the blacked out NeoPixels, so I put those in here. We've got 1 NeoPixel under this crystal and 1 NeoPixel under the top crystal. And yeah, so like I said, you really have got to be very mindful of how you're wiring up these chassis. Rick does provide instructions through his website, and he does have YouTube videos for some of the chassis. Unfortunately for the MPP chassis, there was not a walkthrough video, so it was a little bit more difficult. But yeah, like I said, you really need to take your time with these installs, right? And you've got to use, very thin PTFE wire. So yeah, anyway, so that's where we're at. We've got, this is where your battery will go. These are magnetic doors. Around the other side, there is a board cover, I guess you'd call it, that goes here. The Proffie board does sit underneath this OLED. There's an OLED screen here. So it's under here, and you hide a lot of your wire management under that Proffie. But still, like I said, not a lot of room. Never a lot of room with these Goth chassis. And making our way up top, we've got a PCB emitter from CCsabers, right? I received the parts from Shapeways in natural polished brass. I went behind and weathered them. So I like to keep the two-toned look when I do Rick's chassis. So the crystal chamber parts I kept shiny to make it look a little more dynamic. And everything else I weathered with some brass black, right? We do have a kill switch down here. This is a bass elite speaker from Smuggler's Outpost, 28mm. And that's it, right? So let's go over how to use it. To get at your battery, you want to open up that battery compartment. In this setup, the negative side goes towards the emitter. So you want to make sure you've got the flat part of your battery and you're putting it in negative side towards the emitter. And then you close your doors. All right, so once you put your battery in, you hit your kill switch. There's that OLED. We've got neopixels around the bottom. Both neopixels are lighting independently, those two resin crystals, and then you're ready to go. So when I put this chassis into the hilt, take note of where this brass tactile switch is. Okay, this is a single button setup. So the switch is going to go, this is the switch on the outside of the hilt. So I line up the chassis before I put it in, and then you slide it in, and then it's just going to stop, and I activate it. And then you push it until it stops. Now, with this pommel, if I could find it. So I do want to talk about this pommel. The replica of the MPP hilt has zero venting in the pommel. I mean, there's not even a hole down here. It's indented with a threaded part, but even that does not have venting. So I created my own pommel cap that is vented. You can kind of see through it here. So we get some venting. I found that once I put the chassis in and put the pommel cap on, you couldn't hear anything because there was just nowhere for the sound to go. So that's a little custom part that I designed and printed off. Putting your pommel in. So these are outside threads, and it's a little hard to get it started because it is like chrome-plated brass. It's not very thick. So once you get it started, just screw it all of the way until you get a little bit of resistance. And then you're good to go. Okay, so let's come down to the bottom here. This is a single button setup, so I did set it up with FET's single button prop config. So a long press and release
Vader's assassin
will change your font.
Inquisitorious.
And then, of course, a single
You'll die like the rat you are.
single tap will activate.
When you've already lost yourself, a limb's easy. Kylo Ren.
So let's put a blade in it really quick. This does take a 7/8 inch blade. All right. There is a blade plug that was supplied by Dagobah Swamp. I will ship that back as well. So to put your blade in, you want to rest your blade in onto those brass PCB pins. Now, to tighten your blade, there is a small hole just above the activation button, okay? That is where you tighten your set screw. There is a set screw on that blade holder from Dagobah Swamp. You just want to find it and tighten it down. It is a very small set screw, so don't over tighten because you might strip it, and you don't want to do that. And then you're good to go, right? It's hefty. Even with that blade holder from Dagobah Swamp, makes it even heavier. And obviously you've got a giant brass chassis inside of this thing. But man, it looks good. Let's see what else we got. Really, really nice. So that's it. Nice and easy. Listen, to the client, thank you very, very much for trusting me with another one of your builds. To the viewers, if anyone has any questions about what I did with the Goth chassis or anything about this build, please don't be a stranger. And I think that's it. So with that being said, may the force be with you always.